Hello, and you are listening to EcoJustice Radio from the KPFK Los Angeles studio. A project of SoCal 350 Climate Action, our show presents environmental and climate stories from a social justice frame featuring voices not necessarily heard on traditional, mainstream, or even public media outlets. I am Jessica Aldridge, and on today's show, Carrie Kim is discussing reconnecting people and place through arts and ecology, with special guest John Allen, co-founder of the BirdHouse, and Cameron Miller, site and projects manager for the BirdHouse. Creating the conditions to reconnect people and place, the BirdHouse is a community garden in Hollywood, California, serving as a hub of exchange for those attracted to caring for the land and community through arts and ecology. Its purpose is to engage members in finding creative solutions through permaculture, systems thinking, medicinal plants, art, singing, science, and storytelling. The BirdHouse envisions a lush and vibrant urban landscape where people are cooperating with nature to attain health and well-being born of genuine concern for each other and the environment. John Allen, with his wife Bella, co-founded the BirdHouse. It is their intention to attract agents of change to address the question, what will it take to live a life that the planet Earth now demands? John has extensive experience working as a musician, filmmaker, editor, and director. Cameron Miller is a site and projects manager for the BirdHouse. He grew up in the industrial Midwest and went to university in Massachusetts before landing in Los Angeles working as an actor and writer. After years of work in Hollywood, Cameron answered to a different call and turned his focus to permaculture, landscape design, community building, and food systems through his work at the BirdHouse and beyond.
Aloha, thank you for tuning in. My name is Carrie Kim, and we're here with John Allen and Cameron Miller, both of the BirdHouse, located on Tongaland, aka Hollywood, in Beechwood Canyon. Welcome, Cameron and John. Many thanks for joining us on the show today.
Oh, it's a delight. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I'm happy to be on the call with you.
Thank you both. I wanted to thank you both for offering what you are bringing to the community in Hollywood with the BirdHouse. The motto of the BirdHouse is an oasis of connection in a world of separation. And that is exactly what we need, especially in this COVID-19 crisis we're in right now. I would like to ask you both, it's ironic that you both have come out of the film industry, and now you are both devoted to plants and permaculture. So I'd like to speak to that a little bit, since you both emerged out of this industry. John is a filmmaker, and Cameron, you as an actor and a writer. And I'm wondering, how did restoration of the earth and cultivation of community become your next chapter?
Well, I could tell you a bit about my story. I'll shorten it up real quick because it's an evolution over the last sort of 15 years. I was working in the film industry as a director, and we were doing commercial stuff, and then we were doing documentaries. And it was at a certain point that I just felt very frustrated and not well, knowing that I just didn't have access to change when I looked at these broken systems. I worked in as a filmmaker making ads for the Obama campaign, and I thought that once he was elected, the job was done and that we could sit back and watch a more beautiful world appear. That was sort of a disillusionment, but I had all along been a gardener, and garden has been my solace. I think really where the breaking point was for me is realizing that, in fact, I am at the service of the plants. When I realized that, I had a sense of belonging to something greater than my little world of trouble. And I think that's probably one of the inspirations for the BirdHouse.
And Cameron, how about you coming out of film? You said in the past something that was very funny. You said you were sort of a waste product of the film industry, but maybe you could speak to it a bit more, how you migrated and changed direction and now are at the BirdHouse?
Yeah. So, the waste products of the film industry. A bit of a glib line, but I think that there was a lot of, for a while, there was a lot of creative satisfaction around the kind of problem solving one has to do when you're writing a screenplay or when you're figuring out how to translate the words of some writer into some believable moment between two people. But ultimately, that work was not addressing the sorts of things that were really keeping me up at night. So there was an experience of cognitive dissonance there. And speaking to somebody coming from the industrial Midwest and lived on the East Coast for a time, there was this kind of botanical revelation upon arriving in California. I'd been surrounded by, plants my whole life, but it was in the mode of something like a green blur. But getting here and seeing seeing a bird of paradise for the first time, or seeing bananas growing, there was just this wild sort of invigoration that happened for me. So even while I was doing that work in Hollywood, that interest was being cultivated. But it was during the time of the drought, when that was really bad, that I started to feel the inklings of this change start to happen, and then felt that I really needed to act on it. So I got into the permaculture design course here with Larry Santoyo in Permaculture Academy, and that really just changed everything. And that's actually where I met John.
Together, correct? You two were in the course together. Well, Johnny, you have said that you've mentioned that kind of you both had shared a certain disenchantment with the industry because it primarily perpetuates an obsolete story of our world. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think if you ask someone today to answer the question, when I look at the world around me, I see it's getting ... fill in the blank, that you get a lot of sort of negative take on the world, and the systems that we're living under seem so broken, and the banking and it's falling apart, and the food system and agriculture all show signs of disrepair, and in fact, rooted in these. I don't mean to paint a dark picture because I really have a bright view of the future, but it's sort of motivated by this system collapse.
Knowing something comes beyond it.
Yeah. So I think, just to cut to the heart of the matter, I think we've all been raised on this notion of separation, that we are separate from each other, that we're separate from nature, and that some distortion of the Darwinian model, we are in competition for the limited resources of the world. And that, I do believe, is an illusion. And it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if we live as if that's the truth, it sort of becomes the truth. So we are trying to challenge that model and give ourselves a place to dream and explore, experiment with alternative models, if you will, essentially based in trying to love and care for the world around us. And this is access to abundance and, caring for the land and the people makes us realize just how fortunate and grateful we all are.
You had said something in a prior interview that I wanted just to read it out loud. Everywhere I looked, I saw humans causing suffering to each other and a delicate living planet. I felt powerless in the face of things, and it was making me physically ill. So was the BirdHouse, or do you see the BirdHouse as your response to the sense of powerlessness and now becoming empowered again to be a creative force?
I don't know when I wrote that, but I think one of the things that I'm trying to do personally, and also as a culture of the BirdHouse, is to remove that fear from our DNA to be driven less by fear and more by motivation of what's possible. And I think the real challenge of our times, the real work of our times, is to just fall in love with everything again, to remember how it is, to just enjoy each other. It's so interesting because, we can't really talk about these things without acknowledging that we're in lockdown around the coronavirus. And
yet we
sort of,
still have the need to reach out to each other, even though we're doing things virtually.
Oh, absolutely. We are, by nature, cooperative and collective beings.
Yeah. BirdHouse is so committed to building community. I mean, it's really one of the main fundamental things that stand out about BirdHouse, especially being in kind of the heart of Hollywood. And I was wondering, how did you have instant success in reaching community, or was it kind of a slow build? I mean, were you finding people hungry for this kind of connection? Or talk to us about the evolution of BirdHouse as a hub of exchange with community.
Well, we started thinking about these things about a year before Cameron came on. So I would address that question to Cameron, like, what have you seen since you've been there?
Well, I've seen a lot of response to, I think John and his wife Bella, who co-founded the project, had a real good sense for how to attract people. If you were to meet them, you would see how gregarious and how outgoing and really kind of magnetic they are as people. So they excel at certain social aspects of this whole enterprise. And one of those was just allowing their own love of music to serve as an attractor, operating a all-levels community choir we have here called the Band of Singers, starting that from very early on, kind of the first program that was running, and has brought in so many people that have really become kind of the core of who hangs out here, who shows up at our events, and who makes themselves available to push this thing forward. And it has also become a way of, it's become a direct instrument to explore this ongoing theme of biophilia, the love of life and of living things and the desire to participate with them. So starting from that place, the music was such a good way to bring people in, and because people like to gather around that and gather for, if you add food into the mix as well.
Food and music, yes.
It's such a winning combination. So from that side, I've seen it has been very successful.
So the arts and ecology, it seems like for you at the BirdHouse, it's not possible to keep those separate. They are completely integrated and intertwined and necessary to each other.
Because of the separation, we've had to gather in the Zoom form. So we had, I think, 22 of the singers online with Mesa Pullman, our director, Wednesday.
Oh, because of COVID-19 shutdown?
Because of this virus shutdown, and it was interesting because it was really about just connecting with each other, even though it was, we're able to maintain connection that even as dysfunctional as the sound systems can be on these internet systems, we're not all singing at once. We actually mute, and then we can sing along with the little group that was at Mesa's base camp. And it was just a good medicine, really. And the way we have been doing the Band of Singers is, there are virtues of just being in the presence of each other and harmonizing, but we also try to use it as a pollinator of these ideas. And it's so we call it storytelling, song and storytelling, and we are addressing what it means to hear.
Well, you also, part of BirdHouse also is kind of like a bit of a think tank as well, isn't it? Kind of a heart think tank, right? Where you exchange ideas and you have these salons. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about those events or...
Yeah, I would let Cameron jump in on that, and just to preempt it by saying that these salons that we hold are just a place where people can come together and as maybe a think tank, but I liked what you said, heart tank. So we're not focusing too much upstairs, but letting these ideas come through that are more accessible, let's say, through the heart communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more intuitive. Cameron?
Yeah, those are facilitated conversations that we host here at the BirdHouse. And it's also very much in keeping with the mission that we're trying to, create the conditions that we can start to articulate a new story of interdependence. That things can be processed and they can be learned and refracted and sort of triangulated throughout the whole community. And when you give a space for people to do that, you can be amazed by the stories of people, the things that come out, the private things that they're willing to reveal, which in total, it allows people to feel less alone. Through that process of becoming vulnerable, through sharing or kind of processing difficult ideas together, and knowing that there's a space where they can come and do that. And we've been thinking about ways to solicit topics and questions from the community, and I've been thinking about that in something like, well, is there a conversation you feel like you can't have even with your nuclear family, or that you can't have in the social circles that you find yourself in on a day-to-day basis? What conversations are kind of taboo because it will sort of upset? Not that they all need to focus on things that we might consider associated with negative emotions, but I think that there is a need for those sorts of spaces where those conversations can happen. So
something more authentic, not all curated and perfect.
Exactly.
Things happen on social media. A lot of the times anyway. Do you two believe that it's possible to live an urban life without pushing natural systems to collapse? Obviously you must. As we know that urban density is going to continue increasing. The amount of population that we have worldwide, and we know that these super cities are coming, they are already happening. What do you have to say about that globally?
I think that
Cameron?
we need to start looking at ways that we can try to think about how these cities are arranged, that they might be considered super cities. They may be, in fact, that might be an appropriate term, but well, what are the groupings within that city? It could be regarded as this monolith, as a super city, but within that, there's going to be a lot of different neighborhoods. There's going to be a lot of areas that could have some potential to act as something of a village unto itself. I was just looking at some work of Mark Lakeman up in Portland, who runs the City Repair Project up there. And he uses this term revillaging, sort of the quick and dirty definition of a village there being that the people can meet their needs within walking distance. And I don't know, we're not there. We are producing food at the BirdHouse. It's feeding the residents here, at least some part of their diet.
Right.
In order to be able to have something approaching a sustainable city, you need a lot of sustainable groups within that, of people who are bonded by their skills. Let's be frank, they need to know how to grow food, how to take care of each other, basic services. And then also on the level of the social psychology, how can they be with one another without
sharing?
Yeah, how can they share?
Hoarding and fighting over toilet paper.
If you are just tuning in, you are listening to EcoJustice Radio on KPFK Los Angeles. Host Carrie Kim is speaking with John Allen and Cameron Miller with the BirdHouse, discussing reconnecting people and place through arts and ecology.
So, Cameron, you've mentioned the possibility of having villages within these super cities, despite their size and sort of the density. What do you think about addressing the fact that modern people, urbanized especially, are still addicted to comfort and convenience? Do you think that once we sort of reestablish the village or village-minded consciousness, that starts to fall away? This addiction to comfort and convenience?
Great question. That would be the one of the great challenges of our times, is how to wean ourselves off of that. Because I wouldn't know how to separate the chicken and the egg. I think that part of that village-minded consciousness is bound up in a willingness to forego certain comforts, certain personal pleasures that we take onto ourselves so easily as individuals because we have been trained to do so. And our society, it rewards that.
Habitual. It's just habitual, I think, a lot of it.
Absolutely. But you're totally correct in identifying that as being, one of the great barriers. I was thinking, how could I deepen my response to that, to your initial question a bit? And I think that, the question of the sustainability and of these sort of villages within a super city, part of what that village might be, or how this question of overall sustainability could be achieved, is that there would have to be, maybe not everybody needs the car, not everybody needs a full set of power tools or whatever it is. There would have to be a lot of, I think, compromise and a lot better social organization. It kind of comes down to sharing, I think, as you said.
Much more sharing of resources. Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that. We're witnessing that even with COVID-19 and the fact that, well, of course, toilet paper hoarding, but then we're also seeing sort of the flip side of that, where people are awakening to the fact that this can't be, this is not working, this is not a functional society. We need to share masks. We need to share the supplies with doctors who need the resources that people are, reserving for themselves when the need is really not there for them, but the need is greater elsewhere. This is where we need to sort of reallocate resources to where they're most necessary.
Absolutely.
I have a question for you. Johnny. We've both been under the tutelage of Stephen Jenkinson, and Stephen has commented that ours is the first generation that actually needs to teach our children to be satisfied with less versus more. Would you agree? And you have children, so I'm wondering what your thought is about this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when we say that, the assumption buried in there is more stuff.
Yes. Or materiality of some kind,
Yeah, more freedom to travel, more junk to buy, and this notion of sharing is at the heart of it. We were again raised on this idea that we are independent and we should all grow up and be gunslinging cowboys, and we can do it on our own. And that has led to the breakdown of our communities, where at one time we all shared some of the basics like labor and, childcare, and came together around building the infrastructures. So when you say less, it's like the inverse. The more you give, the more you get back. So I feel like it's the heart of it is building community, and this COVID-19 is just a blessing, I'd say, in some ways.
Yeah.
Not to undermine the harm and pain, suffering that many are going through, but in terms of the overall change, it's breaking down some of these systems and breaking down these social contracts that we've been, I believe, sold on, false promises. I like to say, They call it the American dream because you got to be asleep to believe it.
Yeah. COVID-19 is definitely a radical opportunity to re-envision the world on many levels. So,
cheers to that.
I think, that makes me think also of the movie Parasite, and how Parasite really speaks to the fact of, human beings can be a parasite upon the world, or we could be something more beneficial to the world, when we realize our interdependence and we actually take into consideration all the species that we share this planet with.
I feel like people are like I was and still am, and that is looking for solutions, looking for answers to this question of, wow, what's it going to be like in the future? How are we going to get along? How is there going to be enough food and water for everyone? And I have to say, I feel like I found a really great avenue into answering that question. After we talk about the importance, after we've stated the importance of building community and resilient connections between our neighbors and ourselves, then there's like the possibility of regenerating the soil. And that's one of the things that connects us is the Soil Sponge Collective, and the whole notion that eco-restoration is possible. And that when we do that, when we are building the soil and re-greening the planet, we're actually solving so many of the other problems. And the main one being, this looming threat of climate change. I mean, we call it threat. I mean, it's the issue of the day, So there's just a lot of beautiful emerging science that's showing us just how important it is to do the most simple thing that many of us love to do, and that is plant green stuff and tend to it. Build biodiversity by tending to the soil and building green space where there was once desert.
It becomes so simple. I wanted to ask you both, because you both went into that permaculture academy with Larry Santoyo and Elijah Santoyo, and I was wondering, when you came out of that, how long after that course, completing that course, did you begin the BirdHouse, and did you have any idea what you were going to do with a permaculture design certificate afterward? Or you just were kind of going with your instinct and you figure it out afterward?
I went to work at the BirdHouse about a month after I finished PDC. When I went into the PDC, I was looking to kind of make this as a bridge, a transition step out of film, and I could not have been more lucky. I mean, I think there's so many people who come out of the design courses that have a lot of energy and a lot of ideas, and they've just been exposed to so much information, and they want to apply it, and they don't necessarily have the opportunity or haven't found the way to look for the opportunities around them. When I had a pretty good sense. I mean, there was already a piece of land here that had been, the soil had been resuscitated, was cultivating stuff, but there was a lot of room to apply a lot of the things that I had just recently learned. So it was just dropping in boots on the ground, making tons of compost and learning a lot about plants in a very short amount of time. I mean, as much as I could, but really just going down a lot of rabbit holes and still falling down those. And thank Gaia for that, right?
Right, it's humbling to learn and observing in this way, because I think that's kind of the hubris of human beings, is thinking we know it all, and there's so much we don't know in the mystery of nature, and that's the beauty of it. I mean, who really wants to figure it all out? That's the beauty of it.
Absolutely. This mystery, I think that we have such a strongly developed taste for certainty, or what we accept for certainty in our culture. And it's often there's a great deal of skepticism around around mystery. And I was thinking of the question that you'd asked to John earlier about sort of the stories that were a part of the film industry, and thinking about how the currency of violence or threat builds tension in a story and has this very powerful narrative effect. Mm-hmm. But that there is, on the other side of that, you think about the flip side of that is often like it takes a long time to build really stable, healthy people, planetary sustaining structures. And that makes a hard story to tell in a film. But I think once you start to interact with the plants, I mean, if you start to tune in a little bit to sort of the time scale of how a tree operates, and you can watch it change over the years, your sense of appreciation for the pace at which things move can really change. But it requires this sort of patience that a lot of people are not accustomed to, especially in urban environments, hyper-stimulated urban environments like ours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think it becomes more celebratory because when things, when we do start seeing sprouts of this or that, I mean, it's magical.
Mm-hmm. I like quoting Cameron. He says that the compost is where he goes to pray. And I love that. I really sympathize. I feel like I'm at the same altar daily. And, the plants, the relationship that Cameron has and that I'd say I have with the plants is such mutually beneficial arrangement. I really, the more you tend to them, the more they tend to you in ways that are more subtle than food. And, I just feel like we're all being called to this purpose because that's what the planet needs. That's what is needed in our times, is to tend to the soil and tend to plants. And therefore, you tending to each other and to the animals and insects that come with it.
Yes, it naturally comes with it. I think that's the great healing of humanity naturally occurs when we heal with the soil and are with the soil. I would like for you to both speak to sort of your learning curve in establishing the BirdHouse. Bella, your wife, had said, when you started the BirdHouse, you basically had to give it some time to be able to figure out what the BirdHouse was up to and what it was not up to. So I'm wondering, what is it not up to? It's up to so much, but then what is it not up to?
Oh, I could answer that. I'd say if we just use our feelings as we go, it's just an emergent process that weeds out the things that don't feel right. And maybe redundancy is one of those things. I mean, we realized that the programming we would offer would not be infinite. It was limited in what we could with our staff and our place. But, we knew that certain things you could get elsewhere, But I think she's also talking about how I summarized this experience I had in, I took a plane, sat next to a guy a couple of years ago. I was noodling with the BirdHouse logo, and he said, "What are you up to?" And we got to talking, and I told him about our, eco restoration and community restoration project, and he was telling me that he's a nuclear physicist and rocket scientist for sending space colonies. And it was at that point that I realized there's a plan A and there's a plan B. And I'm working on plan A, which is to learn how to live on our planet. And there's a whole world of people who believe that plan B is the more substantial. Plan B meaning let's take our problems somewhere else.
Like to space, to Mars.
So when Bella's talking about, we are doing some things and we're not doing others, those are some of the more obvious ones.
Understand, yeah. What lessons might you offer someone, because many people see and have identified this need for community. People in the urban settings are really starved for community. And in your own learning curve, what lessons might you offer someone else, others out there who are wanting to start similar projects that are community-based, centers or hubs?
I would say maybe start slowly, or start with what is close to home or near to your heart or near to your skill set. Don't think that you have to do everything at once and serve every member of your community. Acknowledge where your lack of your skill gaps are, and start with the people who are already. Have those conversations. Initially, tell them what you're thinking of doing, and see who's already attracted to that. See who already wants to show up for those sorts of things. And then, this principle of emergence is something that we talk about a lot here in guiding our work, and allow things to kind of organically take shape by what kind of skills show up in the individuals that are present, and what the inclinations are, and what people are not interested in. So it's a constant process of observation and feedback. But I think that it's good to start with some initial idea. Obviously, is important. So here, it was develop the garden, work on the soil, create a beautiful habitat for human and non-human life, and also sing about it. And so, just with those few things, it was already so central to John and Bella's lives. They were creating the conditions for a lot more people to show up, a lot more of these kind of, cross-pollinators to arrive and to bring in their own talents and ideas into the space.
With the quarantine that we're under right now with COVID and sort of the uncertainty right now, I just wonder if you two, of you and all the BirdHouse, staffers are dreaming up new ways to engage the community. I mean, are you going to just continue doing things virtually for the moment? I mean, what will be your approach now for this, who knows, indefinite time?
Yeah, doing things virtually for now is the way that we're going to have to do that. It's a real challenge for an organization that is really celebrating experiential, this conviviality, right? Which means like living together, literally. I mean, it's the closeness of physical touch and laughter and shared work. Those sorts of things are. I don't know the extent to which we'd be able to replicate those. So I don't know that there are things that this will, prohibit, things that are really kind of core to what we do. But, we're committed to staying in contact and just using our social media accounts to kind of keep people aware of things, or to just send them pictures from the garden and let them know that there's still, that life is still continuing here, and that the people who care about this place, we're still working to develop some of the programs. So we're doing a lot of internal meetings, and we hope that we can just come out on the other side of this when that's appropriate, just having kind of better offerings that are more sort of rigorously vetted and thoughtfully constructed.
If you are just tuning in, you are listening to EcoJustice Radio on KPFK Los Angeles. Host Carrie Kim is speaking with John Allen and Cameron Miller with the BirdHouse, discussing reconnecting people and place through arts and ecology.
You both have certificates, you both have studied permaculture design, but at the same time, you're also involved in ecosystem restoration, and I wondered if you could explain whether you perceive a difference between these terms, between permaculture and ecosystem restoration, and whether you see them as related or as different approaches to the terrain.
Well, first, I think it's a good idea to define the distinction regenerative practices, because we all come to use the term sustainable, and I think built into this term regenerative is the notion that we cannot sustain what is broken, and that it takes care and a change of practice to regenerate, to give more life, to restore the life to our landscapes and to our communities. One of the things that we had from the Permaculture Academy is Larry Santoyo used to say, don't try to be wealthy, try to be useful. And that this is something that has driven me is like, how can I be of use to the system and to people, to the ecosystem? And then to look at the difference between, let's say, regenerative agriculture, and which is something that I think should all aspire to, is that the broken farming systems that we have now, which are contributing to so much of the climate issues we have, carbon dioxide in the air, the heat reflecting to expand heat sinks and alter the rain patterns. These are all things that explain the drought and flood cycles that we're having, which are so unusual. And the best way to restore them is to do regenerative agriculture and to simply rebuild biodiversity wherever possible. A scary thought is that, say, 90% of the deserts on the planet are man-made. And that comes primarily from the way we manage our animal husbandry and our agriculture. So the emerging sciences and practices now are so inspiring. I'm just looking to get more involved in giving access to city dwellers, to urban dwellers, to use their resources to get involved. And so we'll be posting our ideas and opportunities for this sort of thing. Eco-restoration villages, eco-restoration camps that John Liu is starting and getting involved with around the world is a really inspiring practice in itself.
Well, I think we know that we have to be in both a global and a local approach now. And, definitely the local is very important in our communities, right where we live. And at the same time, we must have that global vision as well and global action. So, we've been kind of talking about matters of scale and the need to scale up in what we're doing with ecosystem restoration.
The idea is to work at the scale that we have accessible to us. And there's this thing called the Dunbar number, which is humans can relate to others in numbers up to 100, 150. And that this is, what our bodies are accustomed to, and being able to recognize and live with up to 100, 150 people. So we seek to build these hamlets. That reminds me that the project that Cameron and I had together in the permaculture design course was something we called a hamlet, I believe. And and it was designed as a way of connecting resources and needs. So the idea is that you can build your community based on your resources and your needs, and connecting others' needs and resources. And that's something that just takes place sort of by nature of building community, and it is a way of building community.
Yes, we're building our mycelial network.
Yeah. And, if I can add one more piece to that, I'm really sort of enlightened by this model that came out of just doing this sort of thing in our neighborhood. The Hollywood Orchard is another nonprofit sister organization in the neighborhood that Bella and I were one of the original co-founders of. And the idea was to get some land and to build an orchard that the community could be involved with. And Bill Pullman and his wife Tamara Pullman got the ball rolling on this, but that sort of thing takes time. And we realized that there's so many fruit trees in the canyon that we started going door to door and getting permission, getting people involved in picking and allowing us to pick their fruit. And then that fruit then went to street fairs that we would have, picking kitchens, we call them. where neighbors would get together and make food, and the most of it, usually about a ton every time we did it, of fruit would go to a place called Home or the Women's Center downtown, these food deserts. Mm-hmm. And but the thing that I wanted to point out is that how happy the owners of these land and trees were to know that their fruit was going to good use. Sure. That they, for the most part, aren't tending to, that we would tend to them, and that it sort of put on its ear this whole notion that you have to own the land before you can show stewardship type ownership. So it's just a kind of a beautiful model that could spread to other functions. You don't need permission to restore the land.
We have had some conversations about this with Ellen Farmer, who's also involved in John Lee's work. And, you know, on the one hand, we don't need the permission from government to act, but we know on the other hand, we do, on a certain level, want to ask permission of the land, ask permission of the ancestors, ask permission of the first peoples of the land. And so, you know, I know you have been working, the BirdHouse has been working with the Tongva here, and I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more about what that has been like and what the vision is there.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And Cameron, do you want to address?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah, what an honor to be able to do that. To be able to just to be in conversation with people who have a very strong case to probably not associate with us or trust us as people who came here so recently and have done so much harm. But, you know, I found them to be so generous and warm and such, I guess, kindred spirits in the way of looking at the land. But there's this sense of, there's this a lived memory of it maybe within them that comes through in the conversation, where for me, I feel like I'm trying to relearn some of the skills, some of this attunement to how to look at the land or how to be with the land, how to look at its many member beings. But there's this more achieved sense in which I think talking with them, it's their relationship with the land is more integrated throughout the various aspects of their culture. We're very grateful to be talking with them, and it's our intention to set aside a part of the garden here. We've for the cultivation of their plants. Mm-hmm. Part of what we want is for them to have a space here where they are real stakeholders, and they can use it as a space of sanctuary, as a space of ceremony, as a space to cultivate plants and to have that continued cultural transmission, you know, that's going through the generations. And if we're invited to participate in that, then we're very grateful for that. The best thing we can do to make the space available and to be grateful for how we might be asked to participate at that point. But I mean, like I said, just so generous and really funny and warm, and I think I had a lot of anxiety about some of the initial we had with them, because I just thought, oh no, they're going to think I'm a fraud. They're going to think I'm this
you're a white man,
pretentious white guy, and this white guy. And I was like, oh man, you know, they're gonna pick me out. I'm a mark. But that has not been the case at all. They're, in my experience with them, they've just been so happy that we are demonstrating this interest in their culture and in their plan of life. And it's been a blessing. And it's an emerging thing, how just on a social level of like what kind of protocols need to be established for how we conduct this relationship. There's a great sense of etiquette amongst them and how they conduct themselves socially and manage relationships. And we are just learning that and probably making mistakes. And but I think that's a lot of what our work comes down to here is what we're here to do is make mistakes that the next generation can improve upon to a large extent.
Well, it's a big learning to remember how to be a village and act as a village, you know, not in self-interest, but in collective interest. And so it's just kind of a whole relearning process, I think, for most of us. Because it's not really our lived experience for most of us. I wanted to ask you both, being located in Hollywood in Beechwood Canyon, are you doing anything to actively draw in people who, A, they may not see the world interdependently yet, and B, what about this wider audience of people who may not have, a high disposable income or a more privileged lifestyle? Because we know right in the heart of Hollywood, you're going to have people who, even there's a very vast disparity of income. And so I don't know if you guys are doing anything to specifically kind of address that.
Yeah, I can speak to that. First, I just wanted to thank you for bringing up the Tongva and to say that we operate as guests on this land, and we're learning to be good guests, and ultimately, without presumption, I feel like I'm learning to become indigenous, which means not by birthright, but by action, by practice, by understanding. So, yeah, part of that is just learning to take care of where the needs are. And it's not an easy gap to bridge, but I have to speak on behalf of the people in our little silo here in the canyon, which is predominantly wealthy. It's mixed, but there's just a lot of resources here that you don't find in other places. And but when I find that when we give people an opportunity to pick the fruit and then go down to South Central and offer it to the people there, there's just so much gratitude for having that access, because everybody lives in their silos, and so there's very little avenues for cross-pollination, and really the BirdHouse aspires to that and is again an emergent process. And working with the Tongva is one way of working beyond our silos. And we also had a program that we had to give up in offering a place for homeless to come and use the BirdHouse as a sanctuary. We were going to be offering herbal teas and herbal remedy education. That fell apart when the organization we were working with were obliged to close. But so for anybody out there, we are interested in developing relationships like that. It has to be something natural that flows. Where, as much as our heart lies there, it has to be something that emerges, to use that phrase again, is just sort of something that comes naturally.
Yes, I understand. I wanted to have you speak about a story you shared, this beautiful story about life insurance in this previous interview. And I think it's really apropos to repeat it here if you know what story I'm talking about.
The story of insurance versus assurance.
Life insurance.
Yeah. Well, it was a bit of it was an epiphany for me when I had kids, and the insurance agents came at me saying that in order to be a good father, you had to have life insurance. And so, I believed them, and I started paying into life insurance every month. And it was a year later or so that I asked them, well, where is this money going? And after a lot of hemming and hawing, he pulled out their list that they were proud of all of the stable money market funds that they invest in. And it was a list of basically all of the people I've struggled against.
Bank and Wells Fargo.
Wells Fargo, all of the petrol companies, and that these are the people who are responsible for the damage to the climate that I am interested in repairing. So I realized that there was no life assurance in life insurance. If my kids got $1 million, what good would it do them if there was no air to breathe and pour water, etc.? So I think investing in not just money, but in your time and in your thinking toward regenerative practices is more life insurance than anything else.
Absolutely. Food, water, air, community. I mean, it all becomes very simple in the end, what our needs really are. Cameron, I'm wondering if, we just have a couple minutes left. Cameron, could you just briefly share what is the permaculture training that you offer at the BirdHouse?
So we had just, one of the things we put on hold was we had just announced the beginning of our volunteer program, which I would be the leader of, and which will be in time resuscitated and offered. But the goal is through experiential learning. So to be able to talk about concepts in situ and to look at plants, one of the things about permaculture is it focuses a lot on, we can call them functional relationships. So the relative arrangements of things within the given system, if we're looking at the garden as this system, why are we planting what we're planting in the area that we are, next to what other plant? Why? What type of relationship do these things form? What is the role? How are we sourcing the materials that go into our compost? How does that reduce a waste stream that is outside of our place? How can we keep things from going into the landfill and turn that into productivity here? So we have hosted events with different permaculture teachers have come, but in terms of a training, that's something that will be underway once we're able to gather again, and we can be meeting together and actually working on the soil together. So I'm very excited about that, and we put a lot of work into it. And in this time of contraction, we will just use that opportunity to refine that even further.
If you guys could just close with telling us how listeners can engage with the BirdHouse, what are some places they can find you on Facebook or your Instagram, or where should they look for you? Yeah,
the website is www.atthebirdhouse.org, and the Facebook page is At the BirdHouse, Instagram At the BirdHouse as well. You can send us an email at info@thebirdhouse.org, and we'd love to connect. And we also have a YouTube page where we focus. We featured an interview series that I did with, as you say, our mutual tutor, Mr. Stephen Jenkinson, that was very well shot by a friend of ours here. So we're very proud of that piece as well. So I would encourage people to go through those channels. Let's keep it all virtual for now, and we'd love to invite you to the property at a later date,
Thank you both for coming on the show tonight, and thank you for the beautiful, amazing collaborative work that you guys are doing at the BirdHouse. Listeners, please reach out to the BirdHouse in Beechwood Canyon and come home.
Oh, thank you so much for having us.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you to our guests today, John Allen and Cameron Miller with the BirdHouse, and thank you to you, our listeners, for joining us. This has been Reconnecting People and Place through Arts and Ecology. Visit us on social media at EcoJustice Radio and SoCal 350. If you like what you heard and you want others to be informed, subscribe to our podcast, like the posts, and share the episodes. You have been listening to EcoJustice Radio, recorded at KPFK Los Angeles, A project of SoCal 350, the show can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, and at EcoJusticeRadio.org. Created by Mark and J.P. Morris, executive producer Jack Ite, engineer Blake Lampkin, interview hosted by Carrie Kim, and original music by Javier Cadre. And until next time, remember, the power is yours.